Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to review the Guyver. Haven't I reviewed this already? Yes, I have. Here's the thing. So, I kind of went into the Guyver review just kind of like last minute, just kind of like chucking it together. I probably didn't take as much effort as other things to put up the Guyver. I was just looking for content. I wasn't looking for a thing that I thought was eventually going to be trending. And I guess the Guyver eventually did become that. So I thought, I'm like, okay, well, let's a little bit and let's kind of give this a little bit more like of a once over than I would normally. So hopefully people like this review because I'm going through this again with a different approach. So, going into this review, I would say that, one, some people also don't know that the Guyver is also based on an anime. There is quite a few episodes of the Guyver via anime that you could probably go out of your way to see. The Bio Booster Armor Guyver anime. I think there is maybe another title that is to be tied with the Guyver. It's been a while, but you can go ahead and check out any Guyver anime besides these movies. Because I didn't go into the name during this point. But anyways, so we also find out that the Guyver, I guess in certain other countries, was called Mutronics, evidently. That was a different name that this movie was to go under. You're going to find a lot of different things are going to go under different names, and you're always going to find out that that's weird. So, going into this movie, what is the teeing up version of this movie? Where I think a lot of people compare this to like Power Rangers a lot, where it's kind of like very familiar sequences and stuff like that to Power Rangers. Also, we have a character that is to eventually feel mostly to me like a Captain America like character because he is to be 100-fold stronger than he was previously. And so I'm like, okay, so this guy is basically just Captain America without a shield, but with elbow blades. That's great. Take out the elbow blades. That's the only thing that he has for any kind of attack. Take them out. And then find his weakness eventually. If you can pinball your way into figuring out what weakness he has. So going into this movie, I can't help but think that Mark Hamill was supposed to be the Guyver. It seems like even poster will tell you Mark Hamill was supposed to be the Guyver of this movie. But then eventually they just switched to eventually just have Mark just be this detective with this sweet mustache. So, going into this movie, there is just some goofy acting to be done. There is a heavy amount of annoying times where we have, honestly, a character called Stryker who is to do a rap that I'm just kind of it's fun, but it's also just kind of okay, if you would have done that once, I would have been fine with it, but they do it multiple times in this movie, where it's just kind of could this character have died sooner? But this character doesn't really die at all in this film, so that's annoying. So, going into this, so what ends up happening is, if you guys aren't familiar with also a character called Blue Beetle, go ahead and check out, Young Justice. This kind of feels like Blue Beetle to me. It feels like they kind of ripped and copied and pasted from, the Guyver to create, the Blue Beetle character. It'll feel very familiar once you go into, shows of Young Justice, where you see, the origin of the Blue Beetle, their variation of Blue Beetle. But yeah, so going into this, let's go out of our way to say that we have seen this movie and, I guess teeing it up a little bit more than that. So, there is to be a scientist on the run to eventually go and hide this G-Unit. all the rappers are gonna come out and they're like, yeah, it's called a unit. So hopefully I'm not missing my unit anywhere, because man, am I gonna desperately need that. So the unit is to go missing, just like my in just like my wang is missing. No. Anyways, so the Guyver goes missing, and so that leads us to go and have a person stumble upon it, and of course that is to be the one person that has zero fighting skills, so he's kind of forced to be the Guyver, and so that way he can be just a much stronger person, because he doesn't have really all that great combative skill. And so, because we kind of have like this Peter Parker Spider-Man like thing, where like of course like Sean Barker is the Peter Parker, where he's the weakling, where he gets like beat up a lot, and so he has to become the Guyver / the Spider-Man character. So then eventually no one will pick on him anymore, but eventually a lot of people are going to figure out that Barker is going to be the Guyver pretty quickly. like if anybody is to find and know who Barker is, all of a sudden when he's going to become the Guyver, yeah, like the secret is out. Like, is he going to be on the run in the sequel movie where like everybody knows that like Barker or whoever this main character is going to be the Guyver, obviously? Because secret's out there, buddy. Anyways, so eventually this man is to come through and all of a sudden be having to forcibly fight against these things called zoonoids, who are to be from this Kronos corporation that are to have wanted the Guyver. And so now it's just like the Guyver has to go and fight all these zoonoids. Because here's the thing. The aliens had created mankind, I guess. And they also, I hoped, created big gulps, because that would be cool, right? And so these aliens created the human race, let's just say. And so, but they also like kind of like tweaked some of the humans with this gene that turns them into these zoonoids, which turns them into these monsters at will. So at any point in time, every single member of the human race could eventually become a freak, let's just say. But like it's basically just the fact of like, well, like no one can just easily, I guess, channel that power. It has to go into the Kronos Corporation to get them cooking in the oven, let's just say, for them to actually unleash this monsterish power. It's basically like the Deadpool 1 movie, where like Ryan Reynolds had to be like shoved into that oven to cook for a while to get his mutant powers. Like it's basically the same thing, where he was like cooked in that like oxygen tank where it kept like going and like torturing him for a number of hours until he eventually became Deadpool. Same kind of thing. So let's go in here and let's go out of our way to say that we've seen this film yet again, to go into spoiler time. Let's go into it. So it is about that coveted time yet again. Here's the thing. So into spoiler time, it's about that time again to spoil this movie. So here's the funny thing. So we have this whole like Star Wars introductory thing. But here's the thing with this intro screen here. They basically talk about this through the entire freaking movie anyways. Like we have Fulton, the big head honcho guy for Kronos Corporation. He already explains this somewhere later on in the movie, like what happens in title screen. So it's basically just a waste of time to just have this re-explained to us later. But it's whatever. So let's go into spoilers. So uh, we go into the very beginning of this movie, and so it immediately tells us that aliens have created mankind, that all aliens can be zoonoids, that they are to be super monster soldiers. So if you've ever heard of Captain America in your life, super soldier, like same kind of thing. So, but if anything, supposedly this Zoolord, who is to come into creating the Cronus Corporation, and he had started to create all these zoonoids afterwards, picking and choosing which person to kind of bake in the oven, let's just say, to become these eventual zoonoids. So, anyways, this leads us to eventually find out that there's a Dr. Tetsu Sagawa who is just going and just running through the streets of Calcutta somewhere, desperately trying to put a toaster in a briefcase and put a Guyver unit into a lunchbox. So, man, I want to run around with a briefcase full of a toaster. Yeah, that's what I want to do. So, Tetsu is to eventually just start running around like a madman, but eventually, like all of the zoonoids eventually come and find Tetsu. It's kind of an inevitable thing. So, eventually, Lesker is telling Tetsu, it's like, hey, like, you can come back with us. It's like, if anything, like we can still make this work out. But Tetsu is turning into his monster, or his zoonoid, and so Lisker is turning into his. And so Tetsu is like, oh no. Cause really Stryker wanted to get like a first crack at it, but Lesker is like, no. So Lesker is to go and crush Tetsu's head, and here's the thing, folks. So Tetsu's head ends up getting crushed, but you actually don't really see that eventually when they are to like see the body again later on. But whatever, I guess. So the Zoonoids go and grab the briefcase, and they're like, yeah, like, hopefully we don't open this briefcase up to find that it's a toaster. Yeah, we're just immediately thinking that it's the Guyver unit, and so we're just gonna go and run off with this. Yeah, this is great. They should have double checked. Like, we pull off the whole like Rocketeer like switcheroo, where in the Rocketeer movie, like, the guy takes the Rocketeer like thing and like shoves it underneath this plane, and they grab this vacuum and like take it with them to drive off to like make people think that they destroyed the Rocketeer jetpack, but instead they just destroyed some vacuum. Same maneuver here. So we transition on to some karate practice, where all of a sudden we are to have Sean Baker getting freaking decked by this guy named Craig. Like, flipping and flopping, like, punching and freaking just getting his freaking... Like, Sean Barker at this point has a really punchable face. And so Craig is going to be delivering that in full. So we have this karate teacher that is to sit everybody down and to mention about this chi power. I'm like, what, did she watch like Iron Fist lately? And so she is talking about this bizarre throw technique and all this and that. And so all of a sudden Barker is to go off to the side and talk to a girl named Mitsuki, and mentions like, hey, do you want to ride on my motorcycle? And she's like, well, it's better than the bus. And then Barker should have turned to her and said, like, well, take the bus, beer. Like, get out, get bussing. Like, go, no. Am I not good enough for you? And then he should have stormed off and, like, pretended like he was crying. And then Mitski could have been like, no! That's what should have happened. That's what should have happened. So Reed, Barker goes back to his karate practice and is to be taught how to do this throw technique. But really, Barker obviously isn't paying attention, and so Craig gives him a leg for his troubles. And so freaking Barker goes down. Because Max Reed is coming into this karate dojo of the place, and I guess he knew that Mitski would be here. And I do not understand why. Beats me. So, Max Reed is asking Mitski where Mitski is, and she's like, well, I'm Mitski. It's like, oh, so you're Tetsu's daughter? And she's like, yeah. And he's like, well, I have some bad news for you. And so they go into another office, and so Max Reed is telling Mitski that her father is dead. Also, Max Reed is also going to break the news to Mitski that she is not going to be the Guyver in this movie. And that's what really gets her broken up. She's like, I'm not going to be the Guyver in this film? Like, you would have thought that my father would have given me the Guyver and I would have become the Guyver. That would have been sweet. But Max Reed is like, yeah, I'm not going to be the Guyver either. And, like, yeah, that sucks. Who's going to become the Guyver then? Well, that Sean Barker kid. Really? I would have thought that would be, like, the last person to get this thing. Yeah, me too. It sucks, right? So... Anyways, so, Max Reed was to be putting together some Kronos Lab investigation, and because I guess Max Reed has to tell Mitski, what he was up to, bizarrely. Like, he didn't have to tell her jack crap nothing. He could have just said, like, yeah, I was working on something that involved your father. He didn't have to say what. So... and that also gives us a flashback where, bizarrely, Max Reed was watching on as Tetsu was to basically die, and Max Reed did nothing. Like, Max Reed was, like, watching on as, like, these people or monsters, which he couldn't kind of, like, see exactly what was going on. But he noticed that Tetsu was to be killed, and Max Reed did jack crap nothing. So, but, like, eventually Max Reed runs to go and see this Zoanoid body that had his head kind of, like, ripped off. Which I'm like, wait a minute, I thought his head was just crushed. Now we kind of see his head ripped off? I am so confused. Which one was it? So, all of a sudden, we also have Max Reed's, like, boss, who is to be this guy named Castle with some agent. And so, like, Castle is to be like, hey, man, like, we couldn't have caught who did this? Whatever this is? Like, man, this sucks. We can't find Tetsu? Man, does this suck? So, anyways, so they found... they found Tetsu, and so now they kind of, like, quarantine this whole spot off and, bring, Tetsu to, and they try to clean up this crime scene and whatever. So, if anyways, we go back to Karate Dojo where Craig is still beating the crap out of Barker. And, like, it just gets to the point where Barker and Craig are now just getting into a ballroom fight style of fighting. And so all of a sudden we have the karate teacher that is reminding us that she has completely forgotten that this is a karate dojo and is to just tell these two guys to take it outside. Take it outside in a karate dojo. Is anybody having problems? Take it outside, you two. In a place where you fight all the time. Anybody confused about that? I sure as heck am. So, transition us to the Kronos Corporation, where we see Fulton, and he is to get a really just nice, neat little novelty-like gift of a toaster, because Fulton is to get the briefcase to find out that there's a toaster inside of it. And he's like, what? Like, what is this? What, toaster? Like, I don't know if you guys watch Ghostbusters 2 or not, but, like, I don't think that I'm gonna get a toaster that dances out of this. Like, so, all of a sudden, the Zoolord power of Fulton is to come out, because we have this, like, third eye, like, popping out of this guy's forehead. And all of a sudden, we have Lisker who's, like, slapping himself. He's giving himself a wedgie. He's, calling for his mother and all kinds of things. I don't know. But, so, anything we have, like, Fulton, who is just to tell, like, Lisker, get this unit, get it now, go and find it, wherever you gotta do it, go and find this thing, or I'm just gonna keep on slapping the crap out of you. So Lisker goes and runs off. So Barker is to go to check out, like, Tetsu's crime scene, because you know what, like, Barker is just kind of a curious man, and so curious, in fact, that eventually he is going to stumble upon some other person's lunchbox. What a garbage person that is. But, so, we find also Max and Mitsuki, who are also at this crime scene, because just, like, man, just, like, we can just have anybody at a crime scene just, like, going, hey, could I be part of this? Could I go and just, like, trip over some evidence just to ruin a crime scene? I'm sorry, like, if you're not, like, an actual, like, person with a badge, like, you should be, like, not in a crime scene, especially if it involved your father. Like, that would be a horrific thing to go and see. Like, oh yeah, this is where my father died. Oh, this is great. Like, I can't wait to just, like, see him getting carted off through an ambulance. That's great. What the is this? So, we have Castle, who is kind of reaming Max Reed and mentioning that it's like, hey, like, you going and trying to find some Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles? You going and trying to find, like, some monsters? Like, are you going and trying to find a better franchise to hold yourself onto? Like, Star Wars again? Or maybe the Batman animated series eventually somewhere down the road? And Mark Hamill's like, well, yeah. So, Barker is to stumble upon the unit. Not the G unit, just the unit. And so, because Barker is just so hungry that he just has to find food wherever it is to lie, and that is to be in a lunchbox. And so, like, Barker is thinking, like, man, this is a weird kind of meal, this unit thing. This is kind of weird. What is this? What is this? So, that leads us to have Mitsuki and Max making their way back to Mitsuki's house. And so, supposedly Tetsu was to give the unit to Max. So if anything, like, they're even writing in that supposedly Max Reed was supposed to be the Guyver. Like, they're basically saying that, like, Mark Hamill was supposed to be the Guyver in this movie consistently. So, but yeah, like, supposedly from what Tetsu had told Reed, suppose he was bizarrely some like space armor or like some kind of like the Guyver, but like Reed didn't know what that meant. So all of a sudden we have Barker that is coming a knocking onto the door, and so Misky is to open this door, having Reed off to the side, but with this mirror reflecting to have Barker obviously see that this detective is here. So Mitski is to completely forget about Barker because I guess he wasn't like top billing of this movie, right? So, like, she's like, "Oh yeah, I completely forgot about you, Barker, because you're just not important enough in this movie. Like, wait till you change into the Guyver, then you'll be important." Sadly enough, oh my god. So, uh, we transition also to the Zoonoids going and finding the lunchbox, or trying to find the lunchbox, because they're not going to find the Guyver anywhere, because somebody is going to become the Guyver at some point. So here's the very first Stryker rap in this movie, and man, is it just banging! Just like the double decker of banging, man, is it just banging! So, anyways, so like Weber and Ramsey and Lisker are all kind of just like looking for this thing. Like Lisker is just kind of getting aggravated just because like they're like, where are they going to find this thing? Like, it's going to take them forever. It's like a needle in a haystack kind of approach. So Barker is to drive off with his motorcycle in hand that eventually is going to break down soon, because he left Mitski's place because she had company, which was Max Reed. And so like maybe Barker was getting a little like jealous of Reed because like, man, that's a handsome man there, and I think that I'm just not good enough for Luke's like to beat out Luke Skywalker. I'm just the Guyver. So Barker goes off riding his motorcycle to eventually have it break down in the worst possible place, because all of a sudden we are to see this bandana gang appear. One of these, coincidentally, bandana gang members is actually Craig, who, like, we had Barker fight earlier in the dojo. And so, also, I think, like, this guy kind of sounds differently from when he's gang member to in karate. Like, really, I can't really quite place it, but it seems like he sounds differently. So, and also, we just have like the bizarre acting of these gang members eventually once we are to bust into action mode. So, anyways, so the gang members are to eventually gang up on Barker and start just kind of like pushing him around, I think, at first. And because, like, Barker is to all of a sudden have his motorcycle get tossed onto the ground, and then so Barker is just like, well, I'm gonna do my karate on you, and then so all of a sudden, like, all the gang members are doing like this, they're mimicking him, and they're just like, come on, like, yeah, right, you're not gonna take us down. And so that's completely right, because like Barker starts getting chucked around, all of a sudden the unit gets chucked out of Barker's backpack. So Barker is to go and like grab the unit because he's Michael Jackson and he wants to go a little hee hee. No, like Barker is to grab the unit, and coincidentally there are people kicking him and whatever at this point in time. And so all of a sudden, Barker is to accidentally headbutt this unit because people are, of course, kicking him. So, uh, all of a sudden, Barker is to like start becoming this like weird, goofy looking thing that doesn't quite seem like the Guyver. It seems like we're going through like a cocoonish like stage before we get the final variation of the Guyver. And so, like, here's the thing: when someone is to turn into this awful looking thing, I would not be sticking around to see what the final form of this is to be. That's the biggest mistake in all these horror movies. Like, a werewolf is to be like going, "Urgh," and everybody's like, hey, let's see what happens here. No, because you're gonna end up dead. But that always happens in every one of these horror movies and whatever. Or in this case, sci-fi film. Anyways, so of course Barker is now turned into the Guyver, and so the Guyver is to, of course, put a straight up beat down on everybody, because if anything, like, the Guyver is to like take down zoonoids that are supposedly even stronger than normal humans. So in this case, we're to just see the fact that the Guyver can easily take down a human being, but like we're to see like the rough drafts of what is to eventually expand through this movie, where eventually the Guyver is to try and combat like the zoonoids. But like, first off, we gotta showcase how strong he is against a normal human being, even though technically in the very beginning of this movie it says, hey, yeah, this human will be like much more powerful 100-fold. So like, if we didn't get that pre-shot going on in the very early part of this thing to tell us this is going to be a much stronger being, but whatever. So, all of a sudden, there is one gang member that is to bizarrely continue to drop things. Like, this guy has, like, nunchucks, and then all of a sudden he, like, drops the nunchucks. He has a knife and accidentally drops the knife. He has, like a $12,000 like pack of money in his hand to give to the Guyver, and he drops that. Hey man, here's some money. I'm like, please don't hurt me. No, that doesn't happen, but I thought that would be funny, right? So of course the Guyver takes that guy out because he's stupid. All of a sudden one gang member is to come at the Guyver with a gun, and we have a Superman moment where the Guyver is to bend the gun in half. And so the gang member is like, yeah, if he can bend a gun in half, what makes me like not assume that you are going to get bent in half? So you probably should go ahead and just run, you know? So the Guyver just decks all of these gang members, and so we transition to have Stryker find the lunchbox after 1,000,000 years from now, and so they can't find the Guyver. Like, they can't find the unit. They can't find anything. And so Lisker is forced to go back to Fulton. And Lisker is like, well, like Tetsu just pulled a switch on us. And so Fulton's like, a switch? Like, he just pulled a switch on you. Wow. maybe I made the wrong person a zoonoid kind of thing. Maybe I need to go into like the growth room and find myself another zoonoid. You know what I'm saying? So Fulton decides, well, maybe there's a way to quite possibly have Misky have information, and so how about you go and get her now? Just go on and get Misky for me, because she might have information, because maybe Tetsu had whispered sweet nothings to Mitsuki before he was to die, because phone call somewhere while he was running, because they don't have cell phones in this time period, I guess, because it's still like 91. Did they have cell phones yet? Man, that would have helped a lot of that would have helped a lot during this movie, but it is what it is. So Anyways, so Barker is to wake up Toby Maguire style, and like he's to wake up in his bed Toby Maguire style, just be like checking his body to see if there's still alien esh like pieces all over his body. And so that leads us to bizarrely transition to Cronus Corp, where Max and Castle like are like basically just running out of the Cronus Corp, kind of frustrated because there isn't actually any evidence to nail the Cronus Corp for doing any misdeeds or whatever because of Tetsu. That like they can't find any real solid evidence. I'm like, you should have went in there with some kind of something. Like, if anything, like we just have the word of Max Reed seeing something, but it was from a really far away vantage point, and so like even Reed's eyewitness supposedly of that whole occurrence, like it's not solid enough. So all of a sudden, Max is to go into his car and to mention to Castle that he's gonna get enough rope to hang himself. I'm like, oh my god, that has got to be like the worst like thing you could just. Like, I'm gonna get enough rope to just like. What is this? Like the Omen? Damien, this is for you. Like, good God, what kind of line delivery is that? But so, Max is to drive off, and so Castle is telling his agent behind him to like follow him. And so bizarrely, we have this agent that busts out this like huge notebook of a thing, and he's like writing down like Reed must be followed, I guess. I'm like, what the heck is that? I'm like, so like this agent is so stupid that he has to write notes down to like, what the heck is that? So, we transition to Mitski and Barker, and so like Mitski is talking about her father's death, and so Mitski is mentioning that I'm so alone, but I'm glad that you're here. I'm so alone right now with you, Barker, but I'm glad you're here though. I have no one to comfort me that has the ability to hug me right now and like can just snuggle up with me for this mourning process. Like, but Barker, you're right here. Like, good God, is Barker just an invisible man through this thing? Does like Mitski have like not like the inability to remember that Barker exists in this film? It's like, oh, hi, Mark. Like that kind of thing. I'm just like, oh, hey, you're here, I guess. So all of a sudden we have to reuse the karate like teacher to come in and to try to have Barker and Mitski like be separated from this spot. And so Barker goes on to want to go and get food and to kind of quickly come back because Mitski is going to quickly talk to this karate leader or karate teacher, there we go. So Barker is to leave to all of a sudden have both Ramsey and Stryker make their way to Mitski's room to collect her. So Barker is to come back with food, and so like Weber and Lisker are both talking about how they want to go away to Brazil to go and shop and whatever the heck. And so all of a sudden at the same time we have Max Reed that is driving up to also try and talk to Mitski again. So during that time of both Barker and Reed making their way here, we have both Ramsey and Stryker collecting Mitski and putting her in their van. Barker is to eventually spot that Mitski is to be in these people's van, because Barker is to run up to Mitsuki's room to find the karate teacher dead. So Barker makes his way back to this van where bizarrely both Stryker and Ramsey are taking way too much time to put Mitsuki in this van, talking about kryptonite and Superman and like I don't know what the heck else because anyways. So Barker is to go and smack both Ramsey and Stryker with these bottles. And so Barker is to grab Mitsuki. And so Reed is now there, and he is to pull a gun on all these Zoanoid-esque like characters. Reed and okay, I'm trying to like think here where we all like got to a point here. Let me pause for a second. All right, so I just had to take a moment. I was like, where are we? When are we? How are we? So this leads us to have Max, Mitsuki, and Barker running for their lives, running and like going over this fence. We are to start to see like these camera lights and this movie set, and so all of a sudden Lisker is telling all the other guys to not transform, but Stryker is just like, well, F this. Like, you know what? Like, Lisker is probably going to be a lot, like, faster if he is to transform, hence why he does so. And so Stryker is to change into his Zoanoid-like creature and hop over this fence. And so all of a sudden, we are to have a woman, a scream queen, who is to go, ah, like scream. And so all of a sudden, the director is to yell cut. Just be like, hey, like monster, you do realize you have to be like terrifying, like to this woman, right? Like you do realize that you have to be scary. And so all of a sudden, like the director is trying to give this monster notes, and he's just like, you know what? Like I think the way that you have to approach this is you have to play this with truth. And it's just like, and Stryker is just like, yeah, man, like, all right, like, I'll try it again, and like, we'll get it right this time. And so Stryker walks off, and so the director goes back into his seat to find that there is another monster to have been actually the thing to attack this woman. And he's like, huh? Like, because this guy was like talking like how great this like monster looked and whatever. So that transitions us to have Reed, Barker, and Mitsuki, who are to go into this warehouse and hide out to try to figure if they can like kind of sneak away from these Zoanoids, but that's not really going to happen. So that leads to Litsky mentioning it's like, well, I guess since we're in this warehouse now, we can all change into our Zoanoid characters and have fun with this. So every single person is to change. Lisker is to change into his creature, and Weber does also. Ramsey does. Stryker already was. So, like, and then all of a sudden we also have two bizarrish agents that we're working with, Castle, I guess, that also change and come to be extras that are to just easily be killed off. Because once you have extra monsters coming in, like, I'm like, oh, these guys are just here to die. Great. All right. Like, I figured that right away. So, anyways, so all the Chronois, monsters are going through and trying to find where Reed, Barker, and Mitsuki are. And so we again have Stryker, who's giving us another rap with a toilet seat, like, over his face. I don't quite understand that at all, but sure. Like, was he to get like better like rapping power with the toilet seat in front of his face? I don't quite understand what that was to mean. What was the toilet seat in front of his face for? What was that? But Ramsey is to all of a sudden get a big fat whiff of where like these people are, and Stryker's like, well, I don't see anything. So anyways, we eventually find that Max is going to, I think, be the first one spotted. So Max is to eventually shoot Stryker. And so that leads to eventually, like, Max going down some flight of stairs, and both Lisker and Weber are, like, chucking and tossing, like, Max all over the place. Like, poor Mark Hamill. Hopefully he had a good stunt double in this one, because I would have been like, dude, I'm not gonna get chucked. But maybe he did. Like, maybe he was just like, no, I'm not gonna get a stunt double for this movie. Like, no, like, I want to, like, have some credit on my film, just like, yeah, I did a bunch of stunts. So that way I can go and do other movies after this. So eventually Barker that is to get spotted by Ramsey, and so we have forcibly Barker like trying to run away from Ramsey by grabbing this one rope that has this like kind of pulley system where there's like this big like thing of boxes that are kind of being held, and so all of a sudden Barker is to spot Stryker like right under like the boxes of this thing, and so we have Barker who just releases this rope, and then Stryker's like, oh crap, pah. So Ramsey eventually runs down to see if Stryker is okay. It seems that Stryker is just kind of like, whoa. So pushing on, so Weber is to eventually grab Mitski and kind of hold her hostage. So and that is, of course, when the other Zoonoids arrive to eventually get killed off, basically, to get a little face clapping. They get a little face clap. So we have Litsky who is asking, like, where's the Guyver? And the Guyver's like, I'll do you one better. When's the Guyver? And Stryker's like, why is the Guyver? A little Infinity War humor for you. If you guys remember Avengers Infinity War, that movie. So, anyways, so Stryker is like slapping Barker up. And so, like, now, like, Guyver. Now Barker is trying to figure out how to unleash this thing. And he's just like, I do know, like, where the Guyver is. And so Litsky's like, so where is it? And so Barker's like, I am the Guyver. And so that's when we have this, like, cool transformation compared to, like, the first runaround where it's just kind of like this, like, cocoon of thing. And then eventually it, like, butterflies out to be, like, Guyver. Now we just have, like, these pieces coming into frame, which honestly does look cool. And again, we have another Stryker rap, because looking high and looking low, and the guyvin', jivin', flowin' and goin' and what the is it? It's so fun. The Stryker raps are fun. Like, I'm not putting this man down for needing to do any of these raps. It is kind of funny. But, like, we get too many of them. But it's still fun. Because, like, the voice actor guy had to do something. Like, the guy who played Stryker had to do something. So, like, to try to seem unique compared to everyone else. So this was the thing that he was, like, this was the thing that he had to do. So, and I'm sure a lot of people do love it. They probably love these parts. So, if anything, now we have basically freaking everyone gets chucked by the Guyver. Like, you just see everybody just getting tossed freaking everywhere because of the Guyver. We have Stryker who ends up getting tossed. We have extra Zoonoid character that ends up getting tossed. We have One of the extra Zoonoid characters getting his face clapped via the Guyver, like kind of up in the air, face clap, as if that's a heavily devastating maneuver. But then Stryker is to all of a sudden say, "Hey, I'm gonna help one of you guys out, and I'm gonna take this like blade and chuck it at the Guyver." The Guyver moves out of the way, and a blade goes through one of the Zoonoid's head and kills him. And so, like, Lisker is upset of Stryker of killing one of their own, and it's like, "Well, sorry." So there's just scenes where everyone just gets freaking chucked everywhere. It's just like repetitious, like either like people are getting clotheslined or getting chucked into something or chucked somewhere. It's just pandemonium just everywhere. So that just pushes Lisker to now like give up Mitski to give back to Weber, and so now we have bizarrely the Tyrannosaurus Rex, pung, 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 footsteps of Lisker, because if anything, he didn't have those gigantic, like, hard footsteps before. Now all of a sudden he does, because his feet now have to have sound effects. so, so we have this back and forth. Like Lisker is like kind of putting the boots to Guyver, but also Guyver is still like he loves chucking people around. So Lisker is to eventually finally like headbutt the Guyver, and so all of a sudden like the Guyver is to get knocked back, and then he's like, "Well, hey, like, but then he's like, whoa." Like I had way too many like Guyver drinks tonight, so like hold on everybody. And so Lisker is like, wait a minute, that's his weakness. His ball in the center of his noggin, like his pinball is his weakness. And they're like, yeah, the ball, like his weakness. So so they like Lisker is trying to continue to punch Guyver in the face, in the head, and so like, and we have like some of the like Zoonoids trying to grab on to Guyver, but eventually the Guyver is to go and try to like get away from them, and so like the Guyver has his elbow blades out, and so he ends up accidentally slicing Weber, and the Guyver thinks that he's not only sliced Weber, but sliced Mitski in the process. And we're also thinking, where the heck is Max during this? Like, where is Max during this whole debacle? Like, is he really, like, in true... Well, I guess he got hit pretty hard, so, like, maybe he was just knocked out for a spell. So once the Guyver is to think that he killed Mitski, all of a sudden the Guyver has, like, no reason to live, so to speak. And so all of a sudden, like, the Zoonoids go and take the Guyver and push him onto the floor, and Lisker goes and takes the pinball from the Guyver, and so the Guyver just like turns into mush, like what was left of the Guyver body. And so Lisker is like, that's the Guyver? It's like, piece of cake. Like, man, like, high five, guys. Like, yeah. This was easier than I thought. So, anyways, so, Max is to awake to go and try to, like, wake up Mitski. And what happens is that the Zoonoids go and they grab Mitski and they kind of like smack freaking Max Reed to just kind of knock him out again, because they're just going to take both of them. They're going to take both Max and Mitski. So that transitions us to now have Mitski now waking up right next to creepy Fulton, who is to, like, bizarrely, I think, like, lick his, like, lips and just kind of, like, touch Mitski, or some weird thing that he's doing with his fingers What the heck is that? Anyways, so but that's not creepy enough. Fulton is just like, hey, come to my creep factory collection. Come and see my creep factory collection. Come on with me into this other room. Like, come on, Mitski. Like, you have nothing better to do with your life. So Fulton goes and takes Mitski to his growth corridor, where supposedly any number of these things in past could have been a werewolf, a minotaur, a vampire. Like, he's kind of thinking of so many possibilities that eventually a Zoanoid could eventually be in the White House. All joking aside. So, we have also, during this spot, we have Fulton who's re-explaining basically the whole, like, beginning of this movie to us. Like, yeah, like, the aliens created mankind. They also gave us a gene for zoonoids. Isn't that great? Thumbs up. Woohoo! So Fulton is to eventually go and talk to Dr. East. And so now, like, Fulton is like, well, hey, like, what's the Guyver progress? Like, are we gonna get a franchise out of this one? And Dr. East is like, I wouldn't go that far. Like, let's just see how well this one does after. Maybe we'll make a sequel. Like, at least we'll still have the anime show to rest on. I'm like, oh, okay, all right. So if anything, these doctors are talking like gobbledygook, and so Fulton is just like, well, in layman's terms, to people that speak English, what are you actually saying about this Guyver ball? So they're to mention that the ball is supposedly alive and growing, supposedly growing to be another Guyver unit. And so Fulton is like, well, I guess Mitski, we don't need you anymore, because if anything, you're not going to be in the sequel. So, supposedly this Guyver unit could be cloning itself to be a new Guyver unit, is what they ended up saying in here. So, here's the thing. So, Fulton is also to show Mitski that really just Max is getting some work done. He's going and getting some, maybe some Botox. No, like, he's going and, like, he's going and doing the Deadpool thing, where he's going to go and cook in the oven, so that way he can become a vicious, ugly creature at some point soon. So, what ends up happening is Mitski is just like, well, you know what, I think I do have some information for you, Fulton. Like, I think I have something very important I need to tell you. And so Fulton is like, well, great, Mitski, like, tell me the information. And so Mitski is like, well, yeah, I do have something important to you, and it's this. Mitski ends up freaking nutshotting Fulton, and he drops like a rock. So Mitski is going and taking Guyver ball, and she is bizarrely, like, holding it up in the air. Like, I don't know what exactly she is going to do with this ball, but she's going to do something with it. All the while, this Guyver ball is growing in Mitski's hand, and also we are to supposedly, like, realize that the place that they're in is 300 feet below surface level. I don't know why that fact had to be said, but it is what it is. So, what if they couldn't have gotten back? What if both Barker and Mitski couldn't get out of this spot because, like, they didn't have clearance in some elevator to get back up anywhere? Like, what would be to happen after that? I guess they never had that in this part of this movie because no sequel. So Mitski is threatening to do something with this ball, and so Stryker is just like, well, hey man, how about I just grab this thing? And so Mitski is to eventually, like, try to, like, do something with it, like drop it or whatever, but, like, the ball is holding on to Mitski, and so, like, Stryker goes and tears the ball away from Mitski, and it drops into Dr. East's mouth. Because all of these characters have turned to monsters at this point, and so Dr. East is now a zoonoid as well. So everyone is turning into, or everyone had turned into their monster things, and so also we had Mitski threatening that she wants also Max Reed free, but it'll take a moment here to actually get him free. So Dr. East is to eat this ball, and so Lisker is putting his entire hand through this guy's mouth, like, and so Lisker is just like, yeah, I can't get it out. And so they're like, well, cut it out of him. So Dr. East is like, something's growing inside of me. And so all of a sudden he like falls to the ground, and his chest just gets this like cut into it, and the Guyver is to pop out of it. And so now supposedly this Guyver volume 2 is, I guess, even stronger than its original variation. You would have thought that they would have decided, like, well, yeah, hey, that weakness that you're to have, get rid of that. Like, but no, the weakness stays. So anything. So once the Guyver is to pop back up, they're like, hey, like, why aren't you dead? And the Guyver is just like, well, like, I was rejected by death. So in other words, like, Sean Barker, like, was, like, basically forgotten by Mitski, and now, like, death even wants nothing to do with him. Like, man, 2 for 2. So the Guyver is to go and break Max Reed out to where, like, eventually Mitski and the Guyver are to, like, try to, like, take out Max's body out of this thing. And so Max's dimension to the Guyver, it's like, I thought you were dead. It's like, I thought you were dead too. So anyways, so the Guyver is now fighting all of these zoonoids, and also Max and Mitski are to fight the zoonoids as well. And so eventually we get to a point where the Guyver is to eventually go and fight Ramsey and, like, chuck Ramsey into, like, the container where Max was being held, and that creates this, like, big old, like alarm going off and all kinds of craziness. So eventually Max and Mitski are to, like, just kind of, like, run off, and eventually there is to be one of these zoonoids that ends up, like, falling, like, or trying to attack Max Reed, as he is to coincidentally fall at a perfect time to fight one of these zoonoids, which kind of seems so, like, choreographed or forced or whatever. But the best thing that comes out of this is we don't even need a Guyver to take a zoonoid out. We can have one of these zoonoids be taken out by a telescope. A telescope death. So we don't even, like, so the Guyver doesn't even just slice and dice all these things. Like, somebody just can come in and bang one of these things with a telescope, and it's freaking dead. Anyways, so like, shortly thereafter this, we have the Guyver who ends up ripping Lisker's head into 2 parts, like, to rip this guy's head in half, because he calls him a bonehead, and then kills him because bonehead. So all of a sudden, like, we basically take out every one of these zoonoids with the exclusion of Stryker, who has to have one last final line in this thing, and then it goes to black. Which eventually, like, we just have Castle that's saying, I have a job for you, and Stryker's like, dynamite, and then, like, that's how the movie ends, with them going out like that. But anyways, so but before that happens, so we have Max Reed, who is to escape with everybody, Barker and Mitski, but then he is to all of a sudden turn into this insectoid, I don't know if that's the actual term, but you could probably just say it's a zoonoid. He turns into a zoonoid. And so, but like that's kind of where I like Googled stuff and I found like insectoid could be a thing that he turned into, but I don't remember. A lot of people just call it a big giant cockroach of a creature. But anyways, so anything we just have like Fulton who's like just bizarrely just like watching out this door and his like third eye is popping out of his like head or part of his brain. I don't know exactly what that is, but it's his Zolord power. So anyways, so what ends up happening is Max is to die off. And before that, I think Max is to say that the Guyver is like their last hope. Help me, Obi-Wan. You're my only hope. So, if anything, Fulton is to come in and say, oh yeah, Max Reed, he's dead because he wasn't cooking long enough in the oven, so to speak. And so, like, that's the reason why he didn't come into being, like, the perfect Zoonoid, is because he wasn't in the spot to be, like, transformed in there long enough, let's just say, Deadpool wise. So all of a sudden, like, Fulton is grabbing Mitski, and so Fulton is trying to like bargain with the Guyver, saying that like, hey, if you give me the Guyver, I'll give you Mitski. And the Guyver is just like, well, like, I just can't give this up, it's impossible now, like, it's a part of me kind of thing. And so like, we just have where, like, Fulton is like, well, I guess, like, that sucks. So, now we just have it where, like, Fulton has nothing else better to do but just to become this Zolord. Because he's just like, you know what, I just need to turn into this big, huge rage monster. And that looks like some kind of bizarre dinosaur of sorts. Because none of these other things look anywhere close to a dinosaur, with the exclusion of Lisker's like stomping of his feet bizarrely. But now, like, the Zolord has to be this giant monster of a thing that's dinosaurish and whichever. It looks weird. So we have really here where the Guyver is to be kind of tossed around by this Zolord. And so eventually we get where the Zoolord is to kind of like push the Guyver up against something and to take and to have this Zoolord take its tongue out and to try and like tongue the ball that is to be on the Guyver's forehead. And so while that is happening, we have the Guyver who is to open up his chest to eventually like put out this unibeam like attack of its chest. Like, if you guys remember Iron Man, the big like chest attack, like that's kind of what ends up happening with the Guyver, how he like shoots out this big laser that is to come out of his chest to take out the Zolord. I think in the Guyver 2, The Dark Hero, all of a sudden I think we do have the Guyver who is to shoot out lasers in the sequel. Like, I think he ends up like shooting lasers out of his like head, his forehead. But like, I haven't really clearly seen the Guyver 2, so I might be talking and this night might not be accurate, so whatever. So that leads us to eventually just having Mitski and Guyver going and like having this lovey-dovey moment where Barker is to switch back into his normal self for Mitski and Barker to kiss. And so Mitski goes and gives Barker like a lab coat. And so all of a sudden we have Max Reed, who comes back as like a blue ghostly spirit to tell Barker, it's like, I knew you could do it. I knew you could do it. Like, no. Like, Max came back as like the Yoda from like Star Wars. When Yoda was to die, he turned into this blue spirit. Like, no, that's not what happened here. I just made a little joke. But anyways, so After that, Castles make the thing of like asking Stryker he has a job for him. And so, with that said, that's the wrapping up this review. I'm sorry it took too long, but with that said, I also wanted to have more details in this review compared to the original. So, with that said, I'm gonna get out of here. Bye, everybody. Bye, everybody.